Hello there, my name's Tim Skinner and I'm here at AfricaCom 2015, and today I'm speaking to Moussa Dao, who is from Orange, Camaroon. Moussa, thanks for joining us today.
You're most welcome. Thank you for receiving me.
Absolutely. So, I understand that you are speaking here at AfricaCom today.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit more about your keynote session that took place earlier on today?
Well, it was mostly about where do the banks see themselves in the mobile money ecosystem. Because lately, or I would say really, from the beginning of the mobile money story, ever since M-Pesa that did the breakthrough, there's always been a question about where will the bank stand? Because the mobile money is being seen as their ground, and we as telco are legitimately seeing mobile money as our ground, because we're bringing in the volumes, we're bringing in on a mobile phone. So today was an attempt to answer to that question, to say, but ultimately there's room for all of us. And we've been seeing some rather good benefits when the two, telco and banks, collaborate to launch innovations onto the market.
Okay. And where do you see the middle ground, as it were, between telcos and between banks? Because as you said, telcos enable customers to reach the bank, but then you need the bank for the financial service. So where's the middle ground? Where do you think that lies?
You're absolutely right, Tim. And my answer is I'm always tempted to answer the customer is the middle ground. Because the customer is ultimately the one giving us the legitimacy to process his transaction either through a mobile phone or through an ATM or through a POS. If we take the case of Kenya, today the telco is more than legitimate to handle customer transactions, particularly the one that comes onto the peer-to-peer, so people-to-people money transfer or paying bills, because the banks for too long have just given up on that ground. When it comes to giving loans, people will be tending to think that that's rather the bank's ground, because clearly telcos are not banks. But ultimately it's the customer who decides. So I'll be answering customer is the middle ground, and we need to make sure that both telco and banks do work to answer the customer needs.
And it would be fair to say that mobile money is one of the biggest sort of telco services in Africa at the moment, and Orange has a big presence across Africa. Why do you think that mobile money, mobile banking, this mobile transfer and the mobile way of life and way of managing finances, why is that taken off so much? Why is it so important to Africans across the continent?
I think it just goes back to what we were saying earlier. The basic financial means of payment were for long reserved to a certain class of society, particularly the middle class. So in Africa, for a very long time, for you to be able to swipe your Visa card, you really need to get a certain level of revenue. The infrastructure was costly when it comes to POS, when it comes to ATMs, handling the cards, the fees, when it comes to offering the product to the customers. So much to the point that today, you still have got, in many banks, only one line of cards, while into the developed country, you've got 3, 4, the gold, platinum, and so forth. But not having those financial products onto our markets didn't mean that people didn't have the needs. So telcos were the first to bring I would say, credible solution to those needs. And that's why it actually worked so well, because then you had a huge penetration of mobile phone versus a very low penetration of banking services. The two, when the customers actually got to see that there was a marriage possible between the bank services or financial services and the mobile phones, they just decided to put everything onto their mobile phone. And that gave the credibility today that, for example, M-Pesa's got, MTN has got, Orange has got, Airtel has got. Like you say, Orange, we're covering like 16 countries in Africa. In Mali, we transferred about 20% of Mali GDP through Orange Money.
Wow.
It's huge. M-Pesa is transferred about 25% of Kenyan's GDP. So we're talking about a huge amount of money when it comes to financial transactions. But again, it's because we managed to answer in a credible way customers' needs when it comes to financial access.
Right. And the theme, or one of the themes being addressed at AfricaCom this week then, is using mobile and using digital to transform societies, transform nations, if you will. If you were to estimate, or if you could tell us roughly the sort of penetration of mobile banking across the markets that you work in, and then that leads me on to wonder where's next? Where do we go from here to increase that? A broad question that might be.
It is a broad question, but at the same time, the answer, every time we try to answer to that question, people just look at us in a very surprised way. I would say today is very difficult to estimate where would the limit be when it comes to mobile money, mobile banking, or just financial digitalization? Because the opportunities are so many. Just a couple of years back, it was practically impossible to send money between people. Though, funny thing, people were already doing it with airtime.
Right.
So it just didn't have the value that people are giving it today. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about receiving loans, or today actually, it's already happening. We're talking about receiving loans in some countries and paying it back. So the banks are interacting with the customers without actually even seeing them. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about what? Telcos becoming a hub. Like, in the banking system, you've got a hub. Like, you have a central bank, and every bank has got one account, so these money flows from this bank to the central bank and have to redistribute it. Tomorrow, a telco could basically be taking on that role, because imagine a telco being plugged into 3 banks. Team is having an account into 2 banks, so instead of walking into one bank, pulling the money, depositing, no, you just pull it from this bank, from your mobile phone, and putting it into the other one.
Yeah.
And from there, the opportunity just becomes limitless. And that's what's very exciting and interesting into that space. And Africa has absolutely no delay in that one, because in many spaces we've seen Africa importing innovation. In this case, it's rather the way around. So also brings it to real questions. Now that we are able to answer people's needs when it comes to basic financial needs, but that's just the beginning. What will go next? Agriculture, health, application, I mean, just name it.
Yeah.
But clearly today we're saying that a revolution is taking place and much faster than what we expected. So we just need to make sure that all together we bring it forward.
And speaking of being all together, we are at Africa's largest tech show. How do you think that shows like this really helps to drive forward that mobile money ecosystem?
I think it helps a lot. I was just talking to somebody from Sri Lanka, and just before that I was talking to somebody from Asia. Without this sort of platform, it'll be very difficult to interact, to share information. I attended to a presentation where I was reading, I think it was China Telecom, that was also sharing a bit of insight onto their businesses, or World Remit, that was also willing to share. So I think it's a platform where everybody just feels confident. Everybody's willing to do a bit of give and take.
Yeah.
And that all put together can actually help in telling us which direction seems to be the most credible, the most relevant. Because it's true we can try a lot of things, but we don't have time to try them all. So we, just learning onto what other people did, and this platform is definitely an absolute must to have.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much for joining us today.
You're mostly welcome, Tim. A pleasure.